Hello everyone and welcome back once again. This is your history teacher here, and this time I am here with a brand new chapter of NCERT Grade 6 History, that is Kingdoms, Kings and an Early Republic. Students, in this chapter we are going to learn and discuss that how in the past time the Janpadas grew and developed into Mahajanpadas. And later in this chapter, we are also going to learn and discuss a brief case study about Bihar, Magadha and the Vajji Confederacy. So let's start. So students, the first topic of this chapter is how men became rulers. Students, approximately about 3000 years ago, there were many kind of changes that took place in the ways in which the Rajas were chosen. For example, the Rajas or kings in the early ancient times were chosen by Janas, means the common people. But slowly and gradually, as the time passes, they were chosen through sacrifices and offerings. For an example, Ashwamedha Yajna, means to say horse sacrifices. Students, this Ashwamedha Yajna or the horse sacrifice was a major ritual in ancient time. And students, in this sacrifice, a horse was let loose and wandered into other kingdoms. And if a king of another kingdom stops the horse, then the king who set the horse free wages a war against him. But students, if the horse passes through a kingdom unharmed, then it meant that the kingdom becomes a feudatory, means to say an official part of the parent kingdom. And students, the Raja or the king who organized this kind of sacrifice was considered very powerful and had a special seat, such as a throne or a tiger skin. Whereas the other Raja who accepted the supremacy above them were then invited to the sacrifice. And students, all those kings who came brought gifts for him. Now students, the second topic of this chapter is Janpadas. Students, the Rajas or the kings who performed such kind of sacrifices, means to say like the Ashwamedha Yajna, were now known as Rajas of Janpadas, means to say king of kings. And students, literally the word Janpadas means the land where the Jana set its foot and settled down there. And students, later many archaeologists have excavated a number of settlements in these Janpadas, such as the Purana Kila in Delhi, Hastinapur near Meerut, and Atranchikhera near Itaha. And students, during their excavation, the archaeologists found that the people there lived in herds, cattle, and other animals, and also grew a variety of crops such as wheat, rice, barley, pulses, sugarcane, sesame, and mustard. And later, by their excavation, the archaeologists came into a conclusion that the people of that time made grey and red earthen pots. And students, they also noticed that the people of that time used a peculiar type of earthen pots that were generally known as the painted greyware, having a linear and geometric designs. Now students, let's learn and discuss about the Mahajanpadas, means to say whom do we call the Mahajanpadas. Students, approximately about 2500 years ago, some Janpadas became more important in comparison to other ones. And students, these Janpadas then were known as Mahajanpadas. And slowly and gradually, these Mahajanpadas rose to power. And students, these Mahajanpadas were larger and more powerful as compared to other Janpadas. And in fact, they were fortified cities and having huge armies. Students, as I said, that these Janpadas were fortified cities. Now students, can you answer me that why our forts were probably built there? Students, forts were probably built there because people were afraid of attacks from other kings and needed protection. That's why they often built forts around their cities. Students, whereas some rulers wanted to show that how rich and powerful they were. So that's why they built large, tall, and impressive walls around their cities in order to show their powers to other kings and kingdoms. Now students, the another reason behind constructing these forts were that the land and the people living inside the fortified area could be easily controllable. That's why the kings often built the forts around the city. And students, in order to maintain all these things, the new Rajas started maintaining armies. And students, in order to maintain such a big army, the kings paid regular salaries to their soldiers throughout the year. Now students, the next topic of your this chapter is taxes. Students, as I said earlier that in order to show their power, the Rajas, or we can say the rulers, fortified their cities. Now students, there is a question that in order to do such an impressive and a stronger wall, from where these Rajas got the source of income. So students, to meet their requirement, the rulers started collecting regular taxes from the peoples living in the cities. For an example, taxes on crops were collected from people because most people were farmers, and students usually the tax was fixed at 1/6 of what was produced, and this form of taxes was known as bhaga, or we can say a share. Means to say whatever the farmer produced, they had to give the 1/6 part of that production to rajas, or we can say rulers. Students, in the same way, the taxes were also collected from craftspersons as well. And students, these taxes were in the form of labor. Similarly, the taxes were also collected from the herders, and the herders paid taxes in the form of the animals and the animal products. In the same way, taxes were also collected from the goods that were bought and sold through the trade. Now students, the another source of income of rulers were from the hunter and gatherers, and the hunter and the gatherers paid taxes in the form of the forest produce. Means to say they had to provide the forest produce to the Raja in the form of taxes. Now students, let's understand that what were the major changes in the field of the agriculture during that time. Students, there were two major changes took place during that time in the field of agriculture. And the first one was the increasing use of the iron plowshare. And students, do you know why the people of that time uses iron plowshare in their field? Students, this is because could turn heavy and clay soil even better than with a wooden plowshare, so that more grain could be produced. Now students, the second major changes in the field of agriculture was transplanting paddy, where instead of scattering the seeds, the sapling were grown and then planted in the fields, as you can see here in this image. And students, this process required a lot of hard work. So slave men and women that were known as the dasas and the dasis, and bonded laborers also called kamakaras, were employed to work in such kind of fields. Now students, here is a case study about Magad. Students, Magad or we can say Magda, became the most important Mahajanpada approximately around 200 years ago. And students, due to because the rivers Ganga and the Son that flow through Magadh makes an important center for transport, water supplies, making the land fertile, etc. And that's why the Magadh play a prominent role during that time. And students, not only this, in fact, the parts of the Magadh were forested that were used for building houses, cars, and chariots. And students, along with the forested areas, the Magadh also had iron ore mines that could be tapped to make strong tools and weapons. And students, Magadha had many powerful rulers such as Bimbisara and Ajatashatru of the Haranyaka dynasty and Mahapadmananda of the Nanda dynasty. And students, Rajgriha that presently we called Rajgir in Bihar was the capital of Magadha for several years, and later the rulers of the Magadha shifted their capital from Rajgriha to Patliputra, that we commonly known as Patna in present time. Now students, here is another case study, and that is of Vajji. Students, Vajji was the capital of Vaishali, means to say Bihar of that time. And students, this Vajji was a Republican Mahajanpada, as I said, in modern Bihar. And its capital was Vaishali, and it was run by Ganas or the Sanghas, means to say assemblies. And students, in each Sangha there were 100 of members, and each was known as a Raja. And all those members of the Sangha got together to decide the important matters of the state. And students, the most important thing about these assemblies that the women and the slaves were not allowed to be part of these assemblies. And the most important fact about Vajji is that the Buddha and Mahavira were both part of these Ganas, or we can say Sanghas. And students, do you know how the historians came to know that? Students, the historians came to that conclusion that Buddha and Mahavira were both part of these Ganas or Sanghas through the Buddhist books that specifically talk about the working of Sanghas. Now students, that's all about your chapter number 5, and with this topic here, your chapter number 5 is completed. Now I will be come back soon with another chapter. Till then, stay home, stay safe, and stay healthy.